is your major?
I'm still actually undecided. I'm in U0 of arts, but I might choose philosophy, which is why I'm on this podcast. And it seems like a very good opportunity for me to learn how to think in this very complicated world.
How did you come to apply to McGill?
Cheapest option for my family. Studying philosophy is such an important way to be able to study the history of humankind. I don't know, a lot of our perceptions of things that are concrete are not necessarily true. And I think this is definitely like the cliche takeaway of like, what even is knowledge? Like, this is what philosophy can be. It can be simple in the sense of like a Socratic dialogue of just explaining something to somebody as if, not as if they're stupid, but as if they don't necessarily have the same like mastery of words that you do. And just that idea that like philosophy can be something that is simple was, I think, a very deep idea to me that I liked a lot.
Welcome to the McGill Philosophy Department Podcast. My name is Dax Avery Hamouth, and today I'm talking to Marya Tremblay.
Hello.
Hi, Marya. So you're an undergrad at McGill.
Yeah.
How did you come to apply to McGill?
Cheapest option for my family. I'm a dual, actually triple citizenship, citizen of Germany, Canada, and the United States. And my parents' college savings plan was always to come to Canada. And I knew that it was a really great school. I really liked the city of Montreal, really interested in the jazz scene. And I don't know, wasn't much more than that, not gonna lie.
What about the jazz scene?
I'm actually really interested in music. Both of my parents are musicians. My father's a cellist and my mother's a singer. And I'm actually perusing, maybe auditioning for the jazz program, the vocal faculty at McGill. And I was just really interested in seeing live music. I think that's an important part of like cultural experience in college.
That being said, though, music isn't your major yet, right?
Nope, it is not.
What is your major?
I'm still actually undecided. I'm in U0 of arts, but I might choose philosophy, which is why I'm on this podcast, or maybe political science. I'm currently I've taken 2 philosophy classes, or like this is my second in this semester. I'm also taking a poli-sci class this semester.
And why is it that you're thinking about doing philosophy?
I don't, there wasn't like a watershed moment of like, I should study philosophy, but it's more of feeling kind of unsure of what else I should study. And it seems like a very good opportunity for me to learn how to think in this very complicated world. And to elaborate on that maybe a little bit more, I just think that like studying philosophy is such an important way to be able to study the history of humankind and to be able to like walk into a room and be proud of what I'm thinking. That doesn't necessarily mean that like I won't change my opinions, but I just think, especially in a hot topic being like AI, I think that it's important to know like what life throws at you. I don't know.
So you're more interested in learning about philosophy, maybe less for the content, at least right now, and you're more interested in learning how to think. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. So I actually genuinely don't know that much about philosophy. I read some Aristotle in my IBTOK class. I read this really interesting book called Think Again by Adam Grant, and also Humankind by Rutger Bregman, which are more like modern philosophers. But just like the idea of learning how to think through your thoughts and also especially write them down, because writing has always been something that I've really struggled with, is something that really appeals to me more than actually the content itself or any specific type of philosophy.
Why do you think you have trouble writing down your thoughts?
So I was actually diagnosed with dyslexia 2 years ago at this point, and also ADHD. And it's just, I don't know, like writing is always a lot harder to like convey your thoughts than it is, in my head, because things always sound better when they're just like rattling around up there.
Do you think that a philosophy is just about helping you like make your thoughts more concrete, write them down? And do you also think it's about having thoughts in general?
Ooh, okay. So, I mean, I don't know. This is also sounding very like self-centered in terms of like philosophy is all about me, but I think that like it will help me again, like say things that are maybe I'm like I have some sort of like burgeoning idea or something that's not quite like doesn't quite make sense and help me write it out. I think that like university in general actually helps people with this process of like helping their whatever ideas they may have, and also with like the acquisition of knowledge through the philosophy that I will be reading.
When did you identify that that was something you wanted? Was this in high school? Did you do any philosophy in high school?
So again, I've never actually taken a philosophy course, or I don't know if I said this, sorry. I've never actually taken a philosophy course before college. And I kind of like identified it, I think like halfway through senior year. I'd actually I'd taken again in TOK for IB. It's a necessary class, which the International Baccalaureate program. Sorry, I should elaborate that one a little bit. It's an international program that is supposed to like I don't know formed after World War II and is supposed to help in the formation of young leaders. And actually, I really enjoyed IB, but like TOK always kind of annoyed me because it was a philosophy class that didn't quite admit it was a philosophy class. But we also studied psychology, and what I found really annoying was studying specific things like the Stanford Prison Experiment or like isolation of young people in like specific like really horrible scenarios, and it just felt like a really stupid, excuse my crude language, way to like understand human ability and human like interactions, especially in social areas. And philosophy just seemed a lot more thought out to me. And again, this may change, but the idea of studying people who were doing this 2,000 years ago, or even something like that isn't necessarily philosophy, but like Greek myths, which I really like, and knowing that people back then were like very human in the way that we are now really appeals to me because it, I think, brings down our ego in a certain way.
So are you more interested then in philosophy for that sort of I don't know, existential reasons, like your concern, humanistic concerns, maybe as opposed to more objective or scientific
Oh,
concerns?
definitely. Because I mean, I keep on talking about myself in terms of like, I want to have good thoughts, but in having those good thoughts, I'd like to be able to help other people. I think that is fundamentally, I'm not very clear on many things in my life, but that is fundamentally what I'd like to do with my life is to help other people. And I think by organizing my thoughts, not to be like, very, uh, how should I say, like capitalist in the sense of like one must be productive with one's thoughts, but I think by organizing them into a more understandable jargon or whatever, I think that I would be of better use to society and therefore of better use to myself.
Okay, so your outlook is very sort of intertwined with what you can do for the society.
Definitely.
Okay, yeah. Circling back, I guess, to something you said earlier. So you chose McGill partially because you wanted to come to Canada,
Mhm.
partially also because of the music scene, but also because of things like Montreal. Could you maybe speak about that, like specifically McGill's being situated in Montreal?
Sure. I mean, for those of you who don't know, McGill is actually right next to Montreal, which is the namesake of Montreal. And outside of my dorm, I can see the mountain right there, which is really nice. And my father's actually from Mont-Saint-Hilaire, which is about 30-minute drive out from Montreal. So I've been coming up to the this area of Quebec for most of my life, and I have family up here. My grandmother's up here, and I just really enjoy like hearing people speak French because I'm bilingual, actually a little bit trilingual. I speak a bit of German, but hearing people speak French like just on the street brings me so much joy because I think that is really a cultural experience that we lack, especially as Americans, is remembering that there are in fact other places in the world besides the United States.
And how does that feel being an American in Canada? I mean, you're a dual citizen, so you're in a certain sense a Canadian, but you grew up in America. What is it? What is McGill like as opposed to maybe the American institutions, at least by reputation?
So I actually don't feel fully qualified to answer this because I haven't really experienced that much of McGill. But from what I have gathered, I think that McGill really is just a lot more chill. My father has spoke about this in terms of college applications. I grew up in Lower Merion, Pennsylvania, which is a very academically oriented area. 98% of students go on to receive higher education, and I had many friends who went to Ivies, and I was in high school very oriented towards constantly going to college and doing the next right thing, right? And McGill is just, though it's obviously a very good school, people are very smart and professors are just really fascinating to listen to, it's just not that big of a deal. You have people who are living in Montreal, a large portion of the students are from Cégep, and people are often older and are pursuing degrees at later years in life, which I just find is a more inclusive environment in a sense.
McGill is often called the Canadian Ivy, so there's that parallel there. But you think something like the following is true. There's a kind of I don't know. As opposed to the American Ivies, there's something more laid back or maybe more, the school's more integrated into life. Is that what you think?
Yes, definitely. So I wouldn't say laid back necessarily, though I do understand that I said that. I want to reiterate, I think it's more the fact that it's less of a competition among students. That's not to say it's not academically competitive, but people are more realistic of the fact that being at McGill is exactly as you said, a part of daily life. Getting your education, obviously because it's also much cheaper than it is in the United States, is something that is seen as a right rather than something that is given as a luxury to students, which is often seen as people who go to Ivies are very excited to have gotten in there and are feel almost privileged in a sense to be going to an institution. And though definitely I feel privileged to be going to McGill, I see lots of students around me who are like, oh yes, this is just like what I was going to do with my life. Like there wasn't because I was a good student in high school or CEGEP or whatever. Like this is just where I'm going, which I find it's a very different attitude than what I grew up with. I'm not quite sure what to think of it yet.
And so maybe you talked also about students being older from different walks of life. Do you think it's more standardized or the pool is narrower in the American equivalents like, Harvard,
I
Yale,
mean,
et cetera?
I, I think so. Again, I'm not exactly. I have a couple friends at Ivies, but I don't really know. I think there's a lot more students from private schools at American Ivies, and it just seems again more like real life at McGill, but that's also a certain perspective that I have. So I think that there's definitely there's less of a concentration around like freshman year. That's like I think the biggest thing that I can point to as a concrete example. For example, I'm U0, some people are U1, and we're first years, but like you don't necessarily use freshman, sophomore. Like that terminology to refer to students, which I think is an indicator that like not all students are going to be finishing in 4 years. Some might be finishing in 3, some might be finishing in 5, which is not necessarily contributing to like the laid back atmosphere, but contributes to the fact that like I guess something so cliche is like people are taking different paths through education.
And you think McGill facilitates that well?
I think so. Yeah, I don't know. Like I haven't again really experienced much with it. I have to say the being like having to choose your own classes and be kind of like I don't have an advisor as a U0 art student myself is definitely kind of annoying. But you're also, I mean, some of my friends who go to Ivies are paying $90,000 a year US, which is like ridiculous, yes, but you're also paying to have a lot more attention paid to you as a student, as opposed to here where you do take responsibility for yourself. You become an adult in a certain way, not just by doing your own laundry, which is absolutely awful, I must say, horrific. But also through like the idea of like you're responsible for your education and you're responsible for what classes you take. And like this is you putting yourself through school, which is a right that you have as a human being.
So it's more there's more freedom at the cost of
Hmm.
maybe guidance or something.
Exactly.
Okay. And so you're year zero. Do you want to elaborate what that means
Mhm.
exactly?
So, most of the students who are coming in from CEGEP are, which is the Canadian, or excuse me, the Quebec equivalent of an associate's degree, have 13 years of schooling from kindergarten all the way up to grade 12 in grade 11 in American high schools, and then they go on for 2 years of an associate's degree in either trade school or if they go on to university, some sort of specialized degree. And then once they enter McGill, they're usually U1, which is considered Université 1, I think, like University 1. Is like the years, but I'm actually U0 because even though I did the IB program, I didn't unfortunately didn't get my diploma, so I don't have enough credits. But for example, some people in the United States will have enough AP credits or advanced placement credits, or from the rest of like Ontario, Vancouver, might have enough AP credits to go into U1. So it's just like a determination system for what the amount of credits that students have.
But for all intents and purposes, this is your first year at McGill.
Yes, exactly.
And how's that been?
I didn't particularly go out of my way to entrench myself in social things that I should have, which is definitely something as a recommendation to other students, if that is a piece of advice that I can give, is go and put yourself in awkward situations, if you will. but I kind of struggled to engage in social situations because it was just there were so many people here. McGill has, I believe, a population or student population of 40,000, undergraduate of about 29,000, and it was just like all my classes were so big. And I think that paradox of so many people was like, I'm never going to see these people again, so I shouldn't interact with them. But I think that was definitely my downfall. But I'm definitely starting to make new friends this semester. And I don't know, maybe things will be okay, you know?
I hope so. So is it a resolution then to maybe seek out more?
I think so.
Okay, and what does that look like though?
Well, doing things like this is very exciting, but also just going to random things. Like I saw that there was I don't know some sort of meeting of the McGill board club, which board games club, which I think I'm going to go to. And there's just like a lot of stuff to do, and I think that it's very important to reach out to people and just ask if you want to like study or something. Because even though it might be embarrassing at the time, one can learn and grow with those opportunities.
I'm not super privy to the kind of clubs and activities that McGill might offer to undergrads because being a graduate student. Can you maybe talk about that? Like, are there any clubs that are particularly interesting or you think unique to McGill or any events that you want to do?
I don't think there are any clubs that are particularly unique to McGill, but McGill definitely has a lot of clubs. I mean, you can go onto the website, I think, and scroll through, but also things. Clubs have so many Instagram profiles, it's actually ridiculous. I think I need to make myself a separate Instagram account and just like follow these clubs so I can keep up to date with all of their information that they're posting. But there's like, as I said, I mentioned a board games club, there's trivia club, there's of course people are like things going to bars, which is obviously you can drink legally here in Quebec at 18. So drinking is more part of the legal culture here in Canada. But there's, I don't
That's
know,
good we mentioned that.
there's a lot of stuff to do. Again, I say because I haven't really dived into it yet. But maybe also there's lots of intramural sports, which I'm interested in perhaps joining.
Okay, yeah, what kind of sports?
Um, I think I saw dodgeball. I think there's like soccer, definitely hockey, though unfortunately I am not very good at hockey. There's a figure skating club.
Do you have any experience with doing, are you athletic? Are you sportative?
Oof. Okay, not really. I did circus school at the Philadelphia School of Circus Arts for basically like most of my life. Um, but I don't know. I think I did track in 8th grade and I broke my wrist, which was very exciting. Um, but not really. I definitely, I think, should get into sports more, considering what a cultural phenomenon it is in terms of like appreciation of like watching it. Uh, but I definitely would like to, you know.
Okay, circus school is very interesting. Can you tell me about that?
Well, circus school is actually one of my favorite places ever. It's where I met like some of the most kind and caring adults that were in my childhood, and they were just really inclusive. And I don't know, it was just a great way to move your body. And we did all sorts of stuff. And I think the reason that my mother really liked it was because it wasn't competitive. Which, especially coming back to the fact that I grew up in Lower Merion, which is very, very competitive academically, and also parents have their kids do a million activities, and people do like travel soccer where you're practicing 3 times a week and then you go to a game like in New Jersey or whatever. It was just a once a week thing that didn't have any games associated with it, and it was just a really great way to move your body, get to know people without having to have that competitive aspect to it.
And do you like the circus beyond just the sports? Do you like the aesthetic or the culture?
I mean, I don't know. Like running away to the circus was definitely a dream I had as a kid, but I'm not so sure that I can entertain that now that I'm at college and, you know, doing very adult things. But perhaps I shall do that later in life once my parents have paid for my tuition. Speaking of sports, which again, sorry that I'm uneducated in them, but Kobe Bryant actually went to Lower Merion, which is the sister high school to I went to Harriton because it had the IB program. But the famed basketball player who unfortunately died in a helicopter crash in, I believe, 2021 or 22. So yeah, that's my legacy of sports.
How does it? So you're an American citizen, you're a German citizen, you're also a Canadian citizen, and in fact you're Keb. Um, how does it feel being an American Quebecois kind of returning home in a certain sense? You are one of your family is one of the founding families, of course.
Yes. Honestly, I don't really have many feelings on the subject. Like, it's not like some sort of like grand romantic, she returns to her native heritage. It's more of like this is kind of just normal for me. Like, I've kind of always assumed I want to go to McGill, which is like, and some people might see it as like, oh, like she's been like pigeonholed into this. It's not like that. It's just kind of like normal. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it in more further eloquent detail, but I just, I don't know. It's kind of just like Montreal's really cool. I can speak the language. I love hearing Quebecois accent. It makes me so happy. Like it just, I don't know. There's just like an undescribable joy that I feel when I hear people go, "Oh, tabarnak." And it's just like, and you know, seeing Tim Hortons, I'm like, "Ah, life is good. Maybe life isn't so
Do
shit."
they not have Tim's in the States?
They do not have Tims in the States, but I went on a trip to China, which with my school, it was funded by the Chinese state, which was really cool. We went to have like all sorts of food, and it was in the Jiangsu province, and I saw Tim Hortons in China, which I was very excited about. I have a picture of me smiling in front of it.
Okay, so you say McGill kind of feels right in a certain sense, and Montreal, similar thing, kind of feels right. Could you speak of like how does it feel then? The differences, the similarities of McGill and Montreal, and in particular Montreal as a city, as compared to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Okay, well, first of all, public transportation. Ladies and gentlemen, the metro, very exciting. Um, Buses, very well run. And they have bike lanes everywhere, which my father went here in 1980s, I guess, to Marya Tremblay's private cégep. Right next to McGill, and he was in the McGill Symphony Orchestra, and he tells me stories of how he biked to school, which seems very perilous, not gonna lie, in the snow and ice, but you know, I guess he was a strapping young man. But Philly has absolutely, like, basically, no, that's not true. Philly has very shitty public transportation, let me say, as does most of America. But for my friends from Toronto, they take the train in, which is really cool. Unfortunately, there's not a direct public transportation route from Philly to Montreal, but that is something that is definitely of like my American mind immediately pops that out. But also the food, so incredible in Montreal. I had this poutine at Schwartz's, which is a smoked meat place, which Montreal is famous for, and it I think maybe changed my life. It was gloriously fatty, and it was just beautiful. The gravy, I could wax poetic about the gravy, but regardless, Montreal has a very great food scene, and I'm very excited to be here and eat more things.
Maybe could you tell me just more about that? What does it mean for a city to be walkable in your mind, especially in comparison to maybe where you're from?
Well, I've seen many things about how Montreal is the performative male's dream of walking around with wired headphones and feminist literature, but unfortunately, or fortunately, it is really true. Even through the snow and ice, if one has good boobs and pays attention to the salt and ice, one can really walk everywhere, even in the dead of winter when it is ridiculously cold. Just get yourself a really good coat. McGill has a good thing on like how to survive the weather. It's really nice to be able to live in a city and to experience, I think, that fundamentally human experience that is to walk around and hear snippets of people's lives and see Tim Hortons and recognize people on the street. And though, again, I'm not the best person to talk about this because I grew up in the suburbs, fortunately or unfortunately, um, Philadelphia just never really seemed to have that sort of walkable vibe to me. Montreal seems actually a lot more European in that sense of people just kind of hanging out, especially during the summertime or during the beginning of the semester. Like students were just all over. People were on the lawn with OAP, which is the open air pub. Like students were just enjoying themselves, and it's just it's I don't know if this is like a Europe centric look at the world, a Eurocentric look at the world, but it felt very European to me in the sense of like people enjoying the outside and themselves and their leisure time in a way that the United States really fails to do at a fundamental level.
Yeah, I can see that. Sometimes people describe, whether it's accurate or not, Montreal as a European city transplanted into North America.
Yeah.
I think that corroborates. Circling back then to philosophy, I, of course, was your teacher for philosophy of science last semester. Maybe can you say, how did you enjoy the experience? How did you enjoy me as a teacher,
Haha.
but also the department in general?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think it was just a really cool class. I didn't do as much of like intense, like in terms of like my engagement with the class was not as all that it should have been. I was definitely not, I don't know, coming to McGill, first semester of college, definitely overwhelming for anybody. And so it was just kind of like broke down at the end of the semester in terms of like doing all of the readings really intensely, but I still found it really easy to be able to sit in class and just absorb information. Dr. Tao talk in class, and it was just really nice to just sit there and have somebody who obviously knew so much about the way that the stuff that they were talking about. And I don't know, it was just, I really liked it. Like, it was just an enjoyable experience. It was fun to set a baseline. Our conferences were always really cool. So conferences is what McGill calls, I've heard different like people at different universities call them like talk sessions or whatever. They're just like a smaller part of the class, usually scheduled at a different time, where you talk with your TA, which again is your teacher's assistant, usually somebody like Dax, who is a PhD candidate or in the master's program, who has either taken the classes before or specializes in the area that you're studying. And it was just fun because I could, first of all, hear the sound of my own voice, which, if you can't tell, I love. But it was just nice to be able to talk to other people, especially in coming back to the fact that like I didn't really have a great first semester. It was just, I don't know, it gets kind of boring thinking about yourself all the time. It's like, oh, my feelings. But I don't know, coming to conferences, coming to class, it was like, oh, I'm actually here to better myself as a human being, and not only better myself, but better myself for society, for something that's actually interesting to study. And I really liked that aspect, especially of philosophy and history of science, because we were studying like things that were affecting like the very science and the stuff that we study now. And I just think that's so cool, and I really enjoyed that.
Picking up on that, why did you choose philosophy of science as your first philosophy course ever?
Because I got into it. There is not much else to it, ladies and gentlemen.
What was your main takeaway from the course?
Intake. I don't know, a lot of our perceptions of things that are concrete are not necessarily true. And I think this is definitely like the cliche takeaway of like, what even is knowledge? You know, that one goes into a philosophy class with. But it's just, I don't know, that was really entrenched in my mind in the sense of like, even something so basic as the formation of a hypothesis, which everybody is taught in kindergarten, you know, like, what's your hypothesis? Will the volcano explode or will it not explode? And how much baking soda do you add? Like, just the formation of a hypothesis is something that's driven by our cultural understanding, which is Okrulik, right, I believe, or maybe Longrium, Longrino, sorry, that we studied in the last 2 weeks. It was just like, it was so cool to have my perspective shifted each week. And I definitely think that I needed to reevaluate being like, oh, the next person is right, the next person is right. But it was just having all of this information thrown upon me that you hear and talk about of like, oh, people learn so much in college, was just such a fundamentally great experience. And I really liked that.
So it was a good first semester, at least academically.
Yes, I believe so.
And looking forward, what are you taking this semester?
I'm taking Philosophy 201 with Miss Dr. Weinstock, and it seems really cool so far. We just did Plato book 2, The Republic, where he talks about the Ring of Gyges. And I don't know, again, just being able to sit in class, it's an hour and a half, which is a little bit long for my ADHD mind, but like just being able to sit in class, it's like sitting at a movie. It's so cool to have somebody in front of you who knows something so deeply about the subject that they study and that they love. And to know that they have chosen, at least in some part, being a professor and to impart this knowledge upon the next generation is really, frankly, an honor. It's a privilege. And I don't know, I'm really excited for this class. I think it'll be fun.
And can you say what is the topic of the class?
Okay, so it's Introduction to Philosophy 2. There's no prerequisite for it, so a lot of people are actually taking it as an elective. And there are quite a few people in the class, so I don't think it's necessarily a philosophy-centered class, but we're just going to be going through some of the basic kind of texts of philosophy. I think we'll be studying Hobbes next week.
So you haven't done much philosophy yet, but is there anyone, especially in philosophy of science, because that's your first complete course, is there anyone who struck you in particular? Any thinkers that struck you that maybe we can talk about?
Ooh, okay. So I wrote my first essay on Carnap, which was an absolute horrendous thing to get through. It was just so dense and just so full of words that just seemed very elitist to me that I was like, this is, excuse my crude language, stupid. And then we got to Karl Popper, who had some objections to one of Carnap's Carnap's arguments, and he just put it forward in such a simple way that I was like, oh, so it can be like this too. And I think that that was a really just a kind of, I guess, a watershed moment, I guess one could say, of like, this is what philosophy can be. It can be simple in the sense of like a Socratic dialogue of just explaining something to somebody as if, not as if they're stupid, but as if they don't necessarily have the same like mastery of words that you do. And just that idea that like philosophy can be something that is simple was, I think, a very deep idea to me that I liked a lot.
And that came out of Popper. What's his stuff?
Okay, so Popper, he studied in I think he was maybe in Oxford in 1918, and like the first part of this text that we read was about him saying how like Einstein had this prediction for his theory of relativity and how light would bend around a star, and an observation of astrological phenomena, which I believe was a solar eclipse, proved this theory. And so he explained this idea of being so excited, but also kind of wondering, like, how exactly does this idea of like scientific theories, how exactly do they come into existence? And Karl Popper's main argument, which I do have to think on this a moment, is
This is a quiz.
yes, this oh god, is that science. Okay, this is a horrendous simplification, but science should be reduced to a certain set of fundamental object thing language, which means that like wet and touch and hard, so like things that you observe, should be what all scientific theories should be. Karl Popper argues that this is, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but Karl Popper argues that this is not, wait, maybe.
So wait, Carnap was the first view?
Yeah, Carnap was the first view, who was very hard to get through, which I'm still grateful that I did this. Carnap was the first view of like that science should be reduced to object thing predicates. And then Karl Popper, who we read the next week as a contradiction, I guess so, and as a
Rebuttal.
response, rebuttal, said that it wasn't necessarily, I don't know, I haven't read this in a while, shit, wasn't necessarily that science should be reduced to that, but rather that
Your hint is falsification.
falsification. That scientific theories, yes. Okay, I definitely paid attention in class. That scientific theories should be falsified in order to be called scientific theories. Like how Einstein's prediction for the bending of light around a star was a prediction and was then proven true by this observation by an astronomer in 1918 or 19. And that all scientific theories should be falsifiable instead of being reduced to things like hard and like wet, because that doesn't necessarily capture the essence of a scientific theory.
So what you're saying is something like, scientific theories can never be confirmed, even if we reduce them to basic observation, but rather they can only be proven false.
Wow, couldn't have said it better myself.
No, very good.
Okay.
So what is it about Carnap and Popper that stood out to you? Is it really just the fact that Carnap is so complex, like he's mathematically complex, and that Popper is so simple, eloquent?
I mean, I think I kind of simplified a little bit too much, but in a certain sense, yes. Like, I think that Carnap was talking about like the fact that scientific theories should be this sort of like this new definition of scientific theories, which I think is definitely something that philosophy really gets into. Is philosophers always define something at the beginning of whatever their text they're studying, at least in this class specifically. It was, this is this new definition of scientific theories, this is this new definition of like whatever. And Carnap is very convinced of the fact that scientific theories should be explainable by simple things or like simple words in the sense of like object, thing, predicates. Yes, I do remember that. But I feel like Popper was really more humanistic in a way, more relatable, at least for my naive 18-year-old mind, in the sense of he was like, wait a second, like, what are we even trying to do with science here? Like, what's the actual point, guys? And then saying that, okay, like, when one learns about science, let's say, I mean, he does, Karl Popper does not use this thing of explanation, but this is my own, I guess I should say. When one learns about science in kindergarten, in whatever, in books on BBC, it's like, ooh, this is a fun hypothesis, and we're trying to learn more about our natural world, physics, or our own minds. And like, what are we exactly trying to do? So in saying that falsification is how to prove scientific theories, he is saying that in order to do so, we are trying to learn more by falsifying something, which I thought was a really interesting idea. Because especially in history and philosophy of science, we're looking at like, what exactly is science? Like, what is even as an experiment? How do we know what we know, and how can we go back to, you know, the beginning of our theorems and be like, this is definitely true, which I think was such an interesting experience.
And ultimately, it comes down, right, to a question of what does it mean for a theory to be true?
Yes.
You want to talk about that?
Oh ho ho. Okay, so again, this is if I recall all the text that I read. But that was like kind of like the cliche thing of like what even is knowledge. But instead of a little bit more concentrated in this class, like history and science of philosophy, what is a theory? So a theory is kind of like where we start in science. At least that's kind of the way that it was presented in this class. Is so we have something that we think, like, let's say, I think this table is hard. And like, how do we know how to prove that? Like, what does hard mean? Is it something that I feel with my fingertips? Is it like, can I atomically phase through this? Like, how do we know what hard is? And just thinking about something that is so fundamental to our experience as a human being, like you go around as a child and like, ooh, the stove is hot. And then you like learn certain truths, but like, what even is a theory, or what is a truth? And exploring that idea in this class was, I don't know, that was, again, just to use crude language, really cool. And I didn't really understand most of it, not gonna lie. I definitely, if I want to major in philosophy, I'm gonna need to learn a lot more language, a lot more vocabulary to be able to express my thoughts on the subject. But to just be able to experience that was, again, such a privilege. It was really cool.
What do you feel like you came away with from the course? Do you feel like you have any opinions? Or is it something
I feel
more
like I have
general?
many less opinions. Again, this is cliche, but like, I'm like, oh, the more education I have, the less I know. That's definitely true. It's just kind of like, I don't know, I could definitely quote more people, I guess. But like, honestly, frankly, I still have to look up definitions and all that stuff. I think it's more of, I think this is definitely true, an increased sense of wonder for the world that we live in, and a increased sense of respect for all the work that people have done over the years.
That's good. And do you feel like it helped you at all with your goal of making your thoughts more determinate?
I guess so. I guess I can sound more eloquent when I speak, but I think that's more of just me loving the sound of my own voice. I think it's more, I don't know. I think I have more thoughts bouncing around, but they're not necessarily more organized. I think it's taught me to kind of slow down, and maybe, especially with the essays that I wrote, which I may or may not have procrastinated. Um, especially with the essays that I wrote,
Not your teacher anymore. You can.
looking at something and just being able to say like, you know what, this is kind of shit, and I should restart. And not necessarily in a negative way of like, oh, like all of my ideas are bad, because I think it's negative to say that like, as a student, your ideas don't matter. I think everybody's ideas matter. I just think that it's important to look at something and be able to say that, you know what, this actually kind of sucks, and I can do better than this, and try again. And you know what, even if that second try is not as good, at least you recognize something. And I think that's important.
I think that's a really good mentality as a student.
Mhm.
Do you think that this is cultivated at all?
Big questions, big questions. I think so. I don't know. I've always kind of had that mentality as a student, but I recognize, I guess, that it's kind of not necessarily usual. But I don't know. I think, again, people at McGill, again, with a kind of like being more chill, for lack of a better term, is kind of cultivated in that people have cool discussions. Like, I think that's something that I definitely crave, is just like yapping with people about philosophy. And I think that being able to look at something and say that, you know what, like, I was wrong here, is definitely a skill that is cultivated in university. I think it maybe should be cultivated more, but I don't think I really have enough information to make an assumption on that.
And maybe one final question, just ultimately looking forward. Is there any area of philosophy or anything you would really like to know, or any burning questions, et cetera, et cetera?
Man, I don't know. I don't think I've read enough in this philosophy 201. Maybe at the end of this, I'll have some. I don't know. I'd like to read some more and be able to say that, like, I sort of maybe know what I'm talking about.
And are you looking forward to that?
I think so. I think it'll be exciting.
I think that's a good place to wrap up for today. This has been the McGill Philosophy Department Podcast. My name is Dax Avery Hamouth, and this is Marya Tremblay. Thank you for watching.